Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lars Boering, and we're talking about the future and opportunities here today. I asked Chris Potter a while ago, we need to talk about this crisis that has emerged from USAID pulling out, and he was so kind to give us the floor, but it's people on stage, you see the names. I'm not going to introduce anybody. You're journalists, you have done your research. But they will, of course, say what they are doing and how they go about. This is an atypical panel because you are also part of it. I called it family therapy because I think we also have to acknowledge that we have a bit of a problem. You know, we get together at Christmas or Perugia and then we talk about solutions that maybe have already been there, but I think we're in a new era. We cannot talk about Mr. T, that's the rules. We cannot talk. I will have 3 seconds of silence for USAID not coming back ever. All right, we've done that. We don't talk about what is not there. We're going to talk about what is in front of us. And this is an eclectic mix of people that have been so kind to sit here and explain. But I also like that I see funders, I see foundations here. So if they feel that they want to share their insights or their tell us when they go beyond their strategy sessions, then we can certainly continue the conversation. All right, so feel free to join in, and I might also ask you to say something, or I'm going to give the floor to you, the participants in this panel. But to just get going, Peter, we assigned you to go first. Facts and figures, and what is the moment, what is the state? First of all, tell shortly who you are, what you do, very short, and then not your biography, and then tell us here what is the state right now, what are the numbers, what are the hard facts? Push the button, I guess.
Thank you.
Not a nuclear button.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of power here. Hi, I'm Peter. I'm from Budapest, Hungary. I grew up. Now, I run an organization called the Center for Sustainable Media. We do things related to media funding. We work with publishers directly, and we also do advocacy around funding, especially in the European Union. And the facts and figures, okay. I think with the restrictions that you outline, it's very difficult to talk about facts and figures. But I would say 50% of the money, the public sector funding that was used for sort of journalism, information ecosystem, we can debate the definitions. I think that's largely gone now. And I think this is like the coldest, hardest, and probably the most important fact ahead of us. And I think while we are here to discuss how to find new avenues and new solutions, I think no one should be under the illusion that there's going to be some entity or even a mix of entities that will going to come in and bring, let's say, around $300 million to the journalism or the media ecosystem.
Was that the 50%, 300 million?
So there are various figures out there. I think 350 something was USAID, and then on top of that, you had some other United States government funded programs. And then I think it's also important to note that the United States government has a lot of gravity in the sense that there are other big institutions that were funding things in the information ecosystem that are kind of not doing it anymore, at least contemplating not doing it anymore. And these are large technology companies and maybe some other actors that were in this because there was a critical mass that they wanted to curry favor. And now, because this is out of vogue, there is no more power to be had by, I think their commitment was maybe always somewhat shallower. And then I'll stop here with the cold hard facts and let others talk about cold hard facts, and then we move on to like more optimistic things. I'm always here.
Then I'll go to Mira for optimistic things, because Mira Milosevic, you're the director of the GFMD. Disclaimer, I'm on the steering committee, but they do all the good work. Certainly you and your team are taking the lead on getting the information together, but also to think about, okay, what comes next? And we talk about what is gone, but what comes next? And how do you see this field of coming together and trying to find future pathways?
Yes, thank you. So we are a network of more than 200 organizations that support journalists around the world.
A bit closer to the microphone.
A bit closer,
yeah.
Okay. And what we usually do is we bring the community together to see what are those synergies and what are those actions that we can do together. So we used to regard this area where both donors and funders support journalism, we would call it a sector. And I think the major change in the facts and figures, we can manipulate that, from, 300 or 200 million, but there's not much left. So our estimate is if you bring together all the existing donors, if you bring together private philanthropy donors, even some corporate giving for small independent investigative journalism, transnational journalism initiatives, all of those initiatives that are not commercially viable, if you bring all of that together today, you could maybe make up $300 million on an annual basis with a lot of terms and conditions attached to that money. So not all of that money actually goes to local organizations, and not all of that money goes for funding core operations of those organizations. And so, we can try to guess how much that would be, but let's say around 150 million really ends up supporting core functions of those small, local, medium-sized organizations. What we had even before all of this that we are not going to mention happened is the needs of communities when the advertising kind of disappeared. There's the support of local journalism. The gap was already somewhere around 5 billion for local journalism funding globally. So the discrepancy is huge. But now what we are realizing that this is not even close to addressing the gap that was left by commercial revenue or development revenue, and that this money is not systemic. It's more of a leverage for the initiatives that can grow or can bring revenues or solutions in some other way. So I think that's the first kind of thing that needs to happen in our heads and in the systems. The other thing that kind of needs to happen is looking what are those initiatives that can be leveraged? What are those mostly joint initiatives that can come together? And so we have some good examples in our community. So we have, for instance, investigative journalism networks and organizations that have done a lot over the last 10 years to work together. And there's some very successful, and some of the best journalism around there is produced by those networks. And that happens because they are built from the beginning with a collaborative DNA. Then we have now exile journalism networks as well. What we are seeing is now that 50% of the world doesn't have conditions for proper independent journalism to exist. So these journalists now operate from different countries, but they're also now looking at how to, and there are some organizations that are doing really, really good work around that, supporting them. And so that's another kind of lessons learned, what they did. And then we have, community that is now looking at certain functions that can be done by the community together. For instance, we are working together with the investigative journalism, data journalism, and other organizations that have a big requirement for data storage and processing. So in this day and age, and especially with AI, they need a lot of cloud services and cloud infrastructure to be able to produce journalism, to investigate, and to crunch all the data that is necessary for stories. This has been very expensive, not very affordable, even before December. Now, security is not only equally important as the money that goes into it, but security is now becoming like a first item on the agenda to consider how is your data secure, and where are you going to store your sensitive leaks, your data that is from your sources that should not be really revealed. And so we have started working on a Journalism Cloud Alliance to see how this bulk approach could actually decrease prices or find alternative solutions. And so just to finish, I think that as a community, we need to see where our strengths are, where we have purchasing power, but also where we have advocacy power,
Yeah.
and I can maybe speak to that a bit later.
I spoke this morning on the streets with somebody that has been in media development for a long, long time, and he or she, because otherwise you might pin that person down, said this is the end of media development as we know it. Is this the beginning of media development as we need it now?
I think we're going from, my colleagues have coined this, this concept, we're going from so-called development aid to mutual aid. And,
Explain, please.
In our case, this is what I've just, this example that I gave is working together to see where we have power to join forces and how we can leverage little funding from donors and philanthropists to actually make that power significant in terms of creating parallel and new alternative tech solutions, financial solutions, attract investors. I mean, there are a lot of things that could happen. At the moment, it's a bloodbath, and a lot of people are really, really, really suffering, and we are all very disturbed by the fact that there is no quick fix.
All right. This was about optimism and opportunity beyond the bloodbath. I understand, of course, I try to get a little bit of lightweight into it, don't get me wrong, we're not underestimating the bloodbath. Eliza, mutual aid, yeah, you're smiling. We talked about it this morning, and you have a specific, first tell me where you are now in this, as Mira we call it a sector, or in industry. I don't think that we have to argue about that. Just a short intro, but also how do you see the shift in media development, and what is necessary? What do we need?
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Okay, grand.
You start with a big sigh, so I hope it's going to be there we go.
It's
go
the post-lunch in Perugia sigh. It's like the pasta's digesting.
Go ahead.
So my name is Eliza. I am the editor-in-chief of the Fuller Project, which is a non-profit newsroom that does global or transnational journalism, accountability journalism, I'm trying to think of all the right buzzwords, focusing on issues that disproportionately affect women or genderqueer people around the world. And so by traditional media standards, this is a niche beat, but of course, even if you're just taking sort of like cis heterosexual women, that's half of the world's population. And so the idea of trying to build a viable media product that services the interests and needs, but also does the sort of citizen journalism that recognizes that citizens cannot be active members of their societies if they do not have the information they need about how power moves in their societies, etc. So that is the work that we do. We are registered in the US and have a small global team. I live in Amsterdam. So of course, on this panel, I am not a funder. I don't do media development work. I'm sat at the sort of broke end of the scale, perhaps, working in an organization that exists solely through philanthropic funding. We do not ourselves get any USAID money, but we are still affected by what is happening now because, of course, many of our traditional donors or people even interested in giving to this sort of work are saying, well, we have, we might have to be giving out HIV kits, and we might have to be doing mosquito nets and other basic services, and how does journalism fit into that world. So I guess when I was invited onto this panel and thinking a little bit about what I wanted to say, it felt important for me to start by saying, actually, we are not, those of us who do the journalism side, are not insane to sort of have been caught completely off guard when this came around. And the reason I say that is this. We have known for the last 15 years that the sort of journalism as public good, how to fund it model has been broken. And the ways in which we were able to do the work that folks agreed mattered was to get philanthropic funding, focus on this deep, important, investigative, revelatory journalism, and then partner with folks like the New York Times, the BBC, the Guardian, in recognition of the fact that as they were chasing clicks and eyeballs, the sort of nonprofit independent middle were going to do the hard-hitting deep journalism. And so a whole model, a whole part of the media ecosystem has agreed, has come to exist in that space. And we are, when things were going well, recognized for this important work that we're playing in building democratic societies and creating journalism on subjects that we're missing, etc. But we were never, not exclusively, to our own detriment, never interested in thinking really about how do we make the case for what we do to any other constituencies except for the philanthropic funders who are giving us money and the newsrooms that we're working with. And so we have a model, at least in Fuller's case, and definitely elsewhere too, that is 10 years strong of doing journalism in this way and not at all designed to deal directly with audience, to make the case for its journalism with the general public, to explain what the value of our journalism is in any other way except, hey, we are filling a sort of gap in the information ecosystem that no one else is filling. And so, of course, we've been caught off guard when there has been an abrupt change to that system. We may have debated, as we have at many a conference, about how we might diversify and become more resilient, but the entire funding model was, existed in a way that supported this type of work. And so, and then I would like to also add that journalism, by its historical practice, has been competitive, not collaborative, right? It has been who got the byline, who got the first, who did it on their own. And now we are being asked that, and actually even when we recognize it to be important, to work in a radically collaborative way, right? So when the USAID information news landed, I sent a message in a group that you were in, and I said, well, maybe this is a moment for mutual aid. Maybe this is a moment for radical collaboration. And I was reminded, using the pandemic as the example, where neighborhoods, where people who had stopped talking to their neighbors suddenly were playing violin to each other, but also, for a brief moment, thinking about, does my neighbor have enough to eat? What does this look like in the journalistic sense? Can we get there? And my concern is that too much of our DNA might be wired to compete rather than to collaborate with each other in any way that is meaningful, but also to build the trust and the relationships that are required for radical collaborations means that we need a longer runway than we currently have, right? I cannot meet a newsroom here and in a month's time have integrated our systems with each other. And so perhaps there is a moment if we then ask, well, what is the opportunity for the existing funders, for the existing funding? It's to resource us in a way that we can actually be resilient rather than just deliver projects or rather than just deliver journalism. The majority of our funding, even when it was flexible, said, we want to see your output in journalistic terms. It didn't say we want to see your audience development strategy, or we want to see how you will make the case to publics, or how you will work in different languages, or how you will collaborate with other newsrooms. Nothing that was able to create underpinnings that actually, were we to face any shocks, we would be likely to survive them. And so now that is the work that we're trying to do, which is to both keep ourselves alive day to day, to do the work that has brought us awards and audience and reputation, but at the same time to pivot so dramatically in the direction of collaboration, in being in service to audiences, etc., things that we all agree is important, but that has never been incentivized previously, and now I worry that we might not have a long enough runway to get there.
Because you don't have specifically those people also on board.
Absolutely, right? Even, so you take a newsroom like mine, and you say, what does it mean to to be a service to a public, and so we then have to identify, well, who is the public that cares about this work? How do they want to show value for it? If you are a global newsroom that are telling stories about labor conditions in rural India, and is it that community who is expected to pay for this journalism? There has been this huge gap in the sense that actually there's much of the world that needs to be reported on, and it is in all of our interest to understand that world. But we do not have a commercial journalism model that funds that. We agree that this kind of journalism is a public good, and so when we are talking about that public good, what does the opportunity look like? Surely it's not, well, you must all be commercially viable. What does commercial viability look like when you are doing something that maybe not everyone can directly pay for? These are questions we have deferred the answers to, and we can't afford to defer them anymore. But the question is whether or not the funders, the media development agencies, all the people who are there to resource journalism can be as interested as I am in setting my newsroom up to do this work beyond this shock, right? Because I'm sure there will be others, maybe just not as Trumpish as this one.
I move.
Oh, I used the T word.
You used the T word. That's.
I used it as an adjective, though. I didn't, there was.
No extra parmesan on your pasta. Alinda, on the other side of the table, director of Limelight, Alinda Vermeer. You told me that while everybody is trying to get funding for journalism going, you do the same, but for a specific approach. You told me that you talk to people and they say philanthropy, isn't that for art and maybe UNICEF children? Is it that's a really difficult conversation to have. How can you get across the value of journalism and also explain to us what is your approach and how is this future success defined by Limelight Foundation?
Yep. Thanks, Lars. I think, first of all, perhaps to clarify a bit what our approach is. So, Limelight Foundation focuses on strengthening the information ecosystem. Part of that is funding public interest journalism. We believe that's best done by being a very stable funder, by giving core support where we can, et cetera, et cetera. So far, so good. The downside of being a stable funder is that, at some point your budget is completely allocated to renewals. And if you were to take on any new grantees, that means ditching others. That is something that we're not willing to do. So what we are doing at the moment is trying to find additional funding partners. Limelight was set up by a tech entrepreneur, John Kaspers in the Netherlands, soon joined by a second funder, the Hartwig Foundation. We think this model could really work. We are quite young. We're only set up in 2021. So we're now trying to see, can others join? And by that, could we be an even better funder for journalists? Because the more funders come on board, the better for your editorial independence, right? To have just a group of funders behind you rather than two individuals. And so we're approaching lots of different, mainly high net worth individuals to try and convince them to join forces with us. And one of the opportunities, I think, of this crisis, and it's very hard to look at, the bright side of this. I think we all agree this is an absolute crisis. But one of the opportunities I see is that this enables, it makes my pitch so much easier, basically. I can bring it all the way back to the basics and say, look, basic checks and balances. For instance, judiciary in the US is under extreme pressure. We need to make sure that we don't lose media as the critical check on power. So I can just make a very basic argument, really. It's quite easy to make this compelling argument that media needs funding at this point in time. I think there are also plenty of people who are really worried. So we're trying to tap into that, basically. So that's our approach at the moment. I think the other thing we could mention is that if things get worse, right, if we end up in, I don't know, some bigger crisis or conflict, et cetera, is to highlight the value of independent news. We have, figures that demonstrate that you need independent news in the event of a crisis, and that the outcome is better for it, the recovery is better for it. So I will take these two things and do my very best to reach out to as many people as I can to try and get them to join forces with us so that we can expand our work. Yeah.
You don't mind that people in the audience use these arguments, because if they are successful, then more funding will come in?
No, I'm like, everyone use this, please,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah.
But do you feel that this is new arguments?
No.
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 But now
No.
they are more visible, they are more prominent.
Yes, it's like, read the paper, you can see this
Right.
this is what we can, you know, we can boil it down to this.
Did you convince? Did you convince at least one person to?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Optimism. It's possible. It's possible.
But it's early days, sadly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But your approach. Tell us about the approach of Limelight. You want to fund multi-year, but is there a criteria that focuses on, let's say, that should be a good business model, or it should be, or is it just a mix of? Sometimes it just needs to be supported for the sake of it.
Definitely the latter, but I think we've reached a stage where, you know, we just have to be clever as well, right? So if there's any income that you can generate yourself, and I do know it's highly local, you know, what is possible, it differs per country. So we don't want to be prescriptive, but we do ask and say, look, what are the options? And do you need help? Is there anyone we can put you in touch with? Can we pay for a consultant to help you with this? But I do want that request to come from the newsrooms that we support. I don't want to say this is what you should be doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you get that more and more, these requests, or is it? What's the percentage?
That's difficult to say, but we have these conversations with all our grantees.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. You're very ambitious in your approach, because I mean, it's open information. You have a couple of million a year to distribute. You have the ambition to grow to much more in the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. Then you will become one of the biggest funders of journalism around. That gives a big weight on your organization, I guess.
Yeah.
Why this ambition? Do you think that this growth is necessary to fulfill the ambition?
Well, I think we've just seen over the past couple of years, and my background is in the NGO sector, so I was on the fundraising side for a very long time. I think we've just seen that a lot more can be done, a lot more has to be done, and so we're keen to play our part in that.
Yeah.
I think, generally speaking, the resources of the philanthropic sector are they're dwarfed by the size of the challenges, so we'd better be very ambitious.
Yeah. Okay. Sharon, you're sitting next to me, and you're also part of all these conversations. At the same time, before this crisis hit, you already took some steps in changes. Tell us your organization or organizations right now, and tell us what this vision is behind it and what you foresee for the future.
Thanks. Well, for everyone, I am president of the International Center for Journalists, and I am also co-CEO of ICFJ Plus. I will explain that in a moment. But first, I want to just talk about the landscape. And I come from Washington, D.C., so I live at the center of the nuclear blast right now. But to play off a little bit of what Eliza was saying, I do think that what happened with the funding really accelerated, frankly, a trend we have all been seeing. Money disappearing, audiences disappearing, the value of news being questioned, all of these things. And in many ways, trust me, I'm not happy about it either, but because we've lost funding as well. It's affected us personally, but it is where we were headed as an industry, as a sector, I do truly believe. And the fact that so much of the funding of our work was dependent on a single government should tell us something. Nothing good. So back to where I am now and where I'm happy as well placed I think we could be as an organization as we could be at this moment. So again, I became president of ICFJ about 3.5 years ago, and like everybody, the landscape is for us as a media support organization, and where I saw media heading. Again, not rocket science. We all saw all of these trends happening. And a year ago, last February, in Kenya, where I last saw Eliza, well, we started having conversations about merging, integrating with an organization we had actually incubated called Code for Africa, if any of you know it. And Justin Aronstein and I had known each other for years. He's the head of CFA. And we had, to your point about merging and collaborating, I completely agree. The advantage we had is we'd known each other for a dozen years. There was a lot of trust built up between us and our organizations. You don't do something like that overnight. And the goal of this really was, we thought this was really good for both organizations. It was taking basically the global network that ICFJ had built up over 40 years across the world, a lot of trust. We'd never opened offices. We were a very different kind of organization. And CFA had just created immense tech prowess in the civic tech stack and just work of scope across the African continent, that we saw the potential for how this could be scaled, that there is all of this shared infrastructure that is needed across an industry that is under-resourced, that is fragmenting, that is becoming, in many cases, micromedia, news creators. And again, all of these things now are going to amplify, right? We've seen organizations collapse. And so you're going to have a news and information ecosystem that is being coming from all kinds of places, not traditional news organizations necessarily. So we decided to basically merge. We will still be independent entities, but we are forming a joint venture called ICFJ Plus. We're merging all of our back end, our programmatic work. It's a lot of work. Again, it took a year of planning, and it took getting it past my 30-member board, which I was boring Eliza with about. For any of you who need advice on board management, I can write a textbook. And so basically I was trying to turn a 40-year-old organization into a startup. Not an easy thing to do when you have a 30-member board who is very vested. Thank you. And so we feel that not only does it help with cost savings in this environment, and by the way, that board after AID, I got all these emails saying, wow, that was really smart. Yeah, I saw it. But we are doing, it's cost savings. We think what we're going to be providing and really helping news providers to co-create, to develop, whether it's across AI, forensic analysis, safety and security tools, all these kinds of things that are incredibly expensive, you cannot do alone. And again, as you have a sort of shattered ecosystem, how do you do that? And it's not just journalists. I think that's the other thing and the last thing I'll say about this approach is we recognize too, again, it is not just journalists doing that. It is your news creators, et cetera, but it's technologists, it's research, it's civil society. Lots of people are committing journalism, and we want them to commit it with with the journalistic ethics and values that we believe in. And so how do you sort of build a healthier news and information ecosystem? So we're being slightly ambitious, but anyway, that's what we're doing.
I would say not slightly ambitious, very ambitious. I heard you say the word, I talked about this, it might be the end of media development. You talked about media support. What is, for you, is that it's not a new buzzword, but I think you're right, but what is the difference there? Support instead of development?
No, it's a great question. I mean, I think the other word that comes up a lot is intermediary, and I think that for us, we see a lot of media development work has been as an intermediary, right. And that was part of our strategic thinking is the world does not need another intermediary. And so what can we do that actually helps people actually do the work? So I'm not even sure, I haven't found the right phrase, to be honest. Media support, I don't think does it either. So anybody happy to take suggestions. But it is to be able to provide that foundational layer that makes doing the work so much easier, cheaper, quicker, and collaborative. Yeah.
Eliza, I think you responded to when I said media support. Do you have a short observation about it, from media development to media support, or do you have another name, or do you have another pathway to explore?
No.
No?
I mean, I haven't thought very much about what the name of the sort of intermediary is, and I actually agree with Sharon, right? I don't think Of course, the intermediaries were the ones getting a lot of money from the big guys, you know, or the singular government, and then redistributing. And so there's a different type of crisis there. I think when I was listening to Sharon talking, I was nodding vigorously because I was thinking about the amount of humility that is going to be required for us to pivot so radically off the path that we've been on. Because if I was to first step away from just thinking about the journalism or the media ecosystem to thinking about the information ecosystem and all the different people who are committing acts of journalism, there is a very distinct arrogance of news journalists, or, you know, about who we are and how important we are and who we will engage with or not, even within the traditional media landscape, right? There was, that arrogance started with, oh my God, I'm a print journalist, I don't want my articles online, and continues in our industry in lots of different ways. And so thinking about actually the people who are building audience, the people who are getting resources, there is money out there. This is, I think, the mindfuck of it, right? Which is, it's not that we are, it's often like so many other things that there is money out there, but it's not always in the places where it needs to be. There's a lot of money in media. You know, the folks, if you are on Truth Social or any, there is money for media that is fomenting hostility in our societies, that is anti-immigrant, all sorts of different things. That section of the media is actually quite well-to-do. And so the question is not, oh, where is the money for media? It's how do we put money in the kinds of media that is pro-democracy and you know, pro-progressive values and other things like that. I think that is the challenge. And I think sitting in our quiet corner, doing what we've always done until we kind of fall into oblivion is not going to be, I mean, that's not the strategy I'm going for, but that will require some humility to try and rethink who is it that I can work with.
Yeah. Thinking about, we are all sort of in this short-sighted when it's crisis, but we also have to think about the future. Peter, you are one of the persons that is leading this effort that is specifically addressed to the future of, let's say, funding that comes from the EU Commission. I said to some people, it feels schizophrenic sometimes to talk about today and what's happening now, while at the same time we're having these conversations to be working on getting 3 sentences in a piece that will go into the Commission and will define the funding. Can you elaborate a bit on that? 2 years from now, we need to be at a certain point.
Yeah. I think, and this is going to be a very entertaining bit about how the EU budget works. You're welcome. The EU has a 7-year budget cycle called the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, the MFF. And the current MFF runs until the end of 2027. And programming are largely sort of set. There are some programs that fund journalism in one way or the other. There are some other programs that are not meant for journalism, but media companies and organizations can leverage it. The Commission says right now, annually, they spend 50 million euros a year on journalism and adjacent things. Anyone from the Commission here? No? I'm not, like, I understand how they arrive at this figure. I'm not sure that's reflected in the realities of independent journalism in Europe and beyond. Because things are logged in for now, I think one of the things we can do is to think about the next MFF, the one that starts in 2028. And because how the EU works, negotiations for what the next MFF will have already started in Brussels. And yes, it's very much like, it's a 2.5 year long negotiation process where like everybody is talking to everything. There are the Commission is doing a draft, then it negotiates with the Council and representatives of the member states, and the Parliament kind of provides various wish lists and sort of shakes its hand if it's won something, and then it gets ignored sometimes. Right now, I think the EU has resources, and I think it already spends resources, and I think it's a good place to advocate for, this is a priority, we still need this. And some of it is, yes, seemingly boring stuff, is like we need to get 2 sentences in a budget resolution that references journalism, which is not a guarantee for success, but the lack of it will make it more difficult. And then one last point about this. Why I agree that when you are trying to persuade high net worth individuals to commit their money and resources to journalism, you need to absolutely say how important this is for, checks and balances and democracy and all that. I think in sort of a European political scale, the arguments that journalism is good for democracy, I think we convinced all the people we could with this argument. And if we want more money, we need to figure out maybe slightly different avenues. And this is, I understand, slightly contentious, but right now, Europe is focused a lot on security. And then the question is, are there arguments that we are comfortable making that is saying journalism contributes to stability, it reduces the chance for armed conflicts and stuff like that, and therefore it aligns with the priorities of the Commission and aligns with the priorities of the large sort of power blocks in Europe. The other priority right now, both politically speaking and that I think has a lot of grassroots support, is around competitiveness. So any argument that says journalism is good for economic growth, it's good to safeguard against waste and corruption, and I think journalism is that. These are arguments that will have more traction in front of the Commission because it will have more traction in front of the electorate. And I think we need to make a better job for advocating these arguments and kind of showing how journalism value sort of translates for these things, because, again, we need to convince some new people if we want more money.
Are you optimistic that this 15 million will grow?
No. So I think if we can show something around the security and economic growth agendas, then maybe it's not going to be the same journalism support as it was. We can make an argument to spend on technology that is enabling journalism or adjacent to it, and then newsrooms can benefit from that. There are things we can advocate for, but there needs to be a certain amount of flexibility on the sort of publishing end or newsroom end.
I was hoping you would say it will go to 100 million.
Our advocacy goal is to have 150 million a year. You can sign a piece of paper now.
We have microphones available. Yes, I see. Oh, this is going to be, we're going to go over time. I'm going to start with Ukraine in the corner there, I think. Tell your vision, but also keep it short enough.
Thank you so much, Lars. I'm Katya. So I just wanted to share some insights, because my organization on safety and security of journalists and civil society was affected as well, but mostly by cuts from Great Britain. So I started investigating what is happening elsewhere, like in other organizations, in Ukraine, in Europe. So the very grim picture I saw. Lars, why are you doing this? Should I not tell anyone? No. Okay.
That shows that I'm very interested in your story.
Okay, good. So the main thing I figured out is that they moved out Trump administration, and I can say this word, okay? I didn't commit to silence myself. Sorry. So it was influential, basically, for many governments in European Union. And after the Munich Security Conference, it became clear for Europe, and especially for Germany, of course, that there is no kind of peace path for Europe. So there will be a bigger war, and it became clear. So the government started decreasing the funds for civil society and media, or at least discussing this, the decrease, in purpose to increase the money for defense without raising the taxes. So this was the main insight that I got, and I don't think that there is many opportunity on convincing European Union and countries to change it. But just one idea that I have from my perspective, from safety and security and Ukraine experience as a whole, 11 years of war and hostilities, is that I see civil society and journalism as some kind of a third line of defense for the government, for the concepts, for democracy, you name it. So I think it's not only part of security that Peter mentioned. It's really valuable, to raise a journalism issue as a security issue.
All right.
But it's also a natural part of defense, because without civil society and media in Ukraine, the first days of invasion, we would just fall.
Yeah.
Nothing would be, there will be no Ukraine. So
All right.
this is something that can work.
Thank you for sharing the insights. I'm going to move to you, please. Yeah, the microphone will come from that side.
Thank you very much. My name is Jimmy Saleh. We are in this crisis, funding crisis, not because USAID was short, not because Peter and EU are capping their funding to just 50 million, but because of something which we really need to talk about. Some of the actors responsible for this thing are here in this conference. Some of them are not. Mm-hmm. And I want to take both the qualified and absolute privilege I have to name names. We are in this crisis because big techs have cornered the revenues, and we know that. Mm-hmm. So what has become of attempts to regulate big techs in India, in Canada, and the EU? How are we supporting that? How are we amplifying that? We know they've cornered the data, and they manipulate the algorithms, so much so that we are not in control of our audience's data. So how on earth can we make money as publishers? So we need to think about that very carefully and very critically. We can go on and on begging foundations and donors, cap in hand beg. They don't have the money to do that, and they can't guarantee that. It is not, in fact, their business to do that. Yeah. Ordinarily, if you are a publisher and you have enough eyeballs, please, you should be able to monetize these eyeballs. Okay. But we are not able to do that. Thank you.
All right. Mira, you wanted to respond to this.
Do you want to take more questions?
No, just because we're low on time. Is never running out, but we have a couple of minutes left.
I think that's one of the critical questions. And speaking about joint action, I think we're at the point where the information systems have been captured, and that we need real advocacy, and we are trying to do that. We are utterly under-resourced and unable to respond to all the challenges of policy. So Peter just mentioned one process. We are participating in many more. We are participating in the UN conference on the funding for development, where the digital infrastructure will be funded by governments and private sector. And it's all going towards big tech actually getting concessions to own the digital cloud infrastructure of the future. So even there, you need to fight for that one sentence and spend months and months understanding processes and trying to get, not to the table, but to the process. Capacity of the big tech to lobby is in tens of millions of dollars per year. Some estimate maybe $150 million for lobbying in different countries. That's the whole budget that we were just talking about for small media. In terms of ability of this community to do policy and advocacy, I think we need to go and do a bit of resistant movement kind of gathering and organization, and that's what we are doing in a way. We are a policy organization partly, and we are gathering all the people who have the capacity to argue for the language, to argue for the positions, and to do this. And just to finalize, you are right. There is more than 100 billion worth of creators market out there. We need to get together to try to change the rules of the game to work for the creators or those who are committing journalism. And finally, there is more than 100 billion fraud in the digital advertising market because it works for the big tech. And we need to get together even stronger to make sure that this stops and that content creators with ethics, credibility, and the name, and who are human, are recognized in the tech ecosystems. Without that, no funding will resolve, and I agree with you, our problems.
Great. Thank you, Mira. That I was going to ask all of us on the stage. One takeaway, you just gave your takeaway. Alinda, one takeaway from this only 45 minutes, 50 minutes, but also as an inspiration towards the future?
I think the most important thing is just to keep going and keep trying. So with all the different ideas that we've heard here today, we just need to.
Peter? Super short?
Making better sort of data-based arguments for the impact and sort of various impacts of the work we do.
Okay. Eliza?
We don't have a natural right to exist. We have to, as we see this in all sorts of other sectors, people have to fight for their right to exist. And so the same is true of independent media.
Yeah. Sharon?
And I will just say agency. There are many things that we can't control. We can certainly try to change, like the policy. What is within our scope, what we can take our own fate and have agency. And I think we too often don't do that enough.
I want to thank you very much. I know that it's too short to ask everybody in the audience to come up with questions, but my advice is keep having this conversation. Be honest and open and real. We are beyond a existing situation. Think about the future. Be constructive. Solidarity is a good thing and not an old-fashioned word. Thank you very much.
Was that okay?